Hey guys, I'm JC and today we're playing Ratadrabik of Urborg. This is a legendary tribal deck that looks to sack and reanimate legends to make a massive token army to close out the game. If this deck seems right up your alley, then make sure to stop by the channel where we have a deck tech as well as other gameplay videos showing how the deck was built as well as how it plays out. In addition, we also have a Discord group with a channel dedicated specifically to Ratadrabik, so if you'd like to discuss the deck further, make sure to check out the link in the description below. Let's show our opponents just how dangerous multiple copies of a single legend can be. Okay guys, let's see who we're playing today. We have Katilda, Dawnhart Prime, we have Aminatou the Fateshifter, and finally we have Gishath, Sun's Avatar. Okay, let's take a look at our opening hand. I don't have to really look at it too long. One land, no ramp, we have to mulligan it. Alright, this second hand did have a little hope until I saw that we had one land again in our hand, so unfortunately we're going to have to mulligan and go down to 6. Okay, and this hand looks a lot better. We've got our 2 lands, we have some ramp, we also have a sacrifice outlet, as well as card draw, so I think we can definitely keep this. And we'll put Whisper on the bottom of our library. Gishath gets the game going by playing a land. And then they cast a Diligent Farmhand, 1 and a green, sack it, search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. And if Diligent Farmhand is in a graveyard, effects from spells named Muscle Burst counted as a card named Muscle Burst. And that's it for them. And we draw a Victimize. Alright, well let's put our Emiria into play. We'll have it come into play tapped. And then we'll pass the turn. Katilda plays a land. And then they cast a Lunarch Veteran. Whenever another creature ETBs under your control, you gain a life, and you can pay 2 mana to disturb it. And that's going to be it for their turn. Aminatou plays a Shockland, but they have it come into play tapped, and then they pass the turn. Gishath plays a land, and then they cast a Marauding Raptor. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever another creature ETBs under your control, Marauding Raptor deals 2 damage to it. If a dinosaur is dealt damage this way, Marauding Raptor gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Now they move to combat, they swing the farmhand towards us, we take the damage, and then they pass the turn to us. And thankfully we do draw a land for turn. Okay, well we'll play our Vault of Champions, and then let's cast our Charcoal Diamond. And that's going to be it for our turn. Katilda plays a land, and now they cast their commander, Katilda, Dawnhart Prime. It has protection from werewolves, and human creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any of this creature's colors, and for 6 mana and tap it, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. And when they command ETBs, that does trigger Lunarch Veteran, so they gain a life. And next they cast a Legion's Landing. When it ETBs, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink, and whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, transform Legion's Landing. So now when it ETBs, it will make them a 1/1 vampire. That also triggers Lunarch Veteran to gain them a life. And then they pass the turn from there. Aminatou plays a land. Next they cast a Weathered Wayfarer. For white, tap, search your library for a land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Activate only if an opponent controls more lands than you. And that's going to be it for them. Gishath plays a land. Next they cast a Dawntreader Elk. Green, sack it, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. When that ETBs, that also triggers their Marauding Raptor. So the Elk will actually die there. Not too sure if that was a mistake on their behalf or not. Now they move to combat. The Raptor goes towards Katilda. The Katilda player just decides to take the damage. And that is going to be it for the Gishath player. And we draw a Gift of Immortality. Okay, well let's play our Swamp. And now's the time we get down our commander. And the great thing about getting Ratadrabik down early is with its Ward 2 ability, it makes it really hard for your opponents to want to use removal on it because they essentially have to waste most of their turn actually taking it out. But we'll just pass the turn from here. Katilda plays a land. Next they cast an Oketra's Monument. White creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with Vigilance. After that they cast a Monastery Mentor that triggers their Oketra's Monument, so they'll make a 1/1 white warrior creature token. The Mentor has Prowess, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 white monk creature token with Prowess. And when the warrior token ETBs, that triggers their Lunarch Veteran. And then when the Monastery Mentor ETBs, it'll do the same thing. The Katilda player is certainly going wide pretty fast here. Now they do move to combat, but they decide not to attack, and then they pass the turn. Aminatou plays the land. Next they cast a Buried Alive. Search your library for up to 3 creature cards, put them into your graveyard, then shuffle. Okay, this is a little concerning. I'm actually wishing our Victimize was one of our other reanimation spells now, one that could target our opponent's graveyards. And it looks like they get an Agent of Treachery, a Sheoldred Whispering one, as well as an Elishnorn Grand Sanomite. 2 out of the 3 of those creatures that are actually in our deck. Now we just got to really hope they don't have any reanimation effects in hand. But that is going to be it for their turn. Gishath starts by playing a Hideaway land, a Spine Rock Knoll. So they can pay a red and tap it, and you can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost if an opponent was dealt 7 or more damage this turn. So what they're doing now is looking at the top 4 cards of their library and then choosing one to put under the land. No doubt they probably tuck a big dinosaur. After that, they sack their Diligent Farmhand. Now they'll search their library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. And they just find themselves a Plains. Now they move to combat. And they send the Raptor towards the Aminatou player. Probably pretty fearful of what's in their graveyard. And that's pretty understandable. They decide not to block taking the damage. And then they pass the turn to us. And we draw a Drivnod for turn. Okay, well I think our turn's going to be pretty straightforward. We're just going to cast Braids and hope to draw into some good cards. So now we will move to combat. We'll swing at the Aminatou player with our Ratadrabik. They just take the damage. Now we're going to move to our end step. Our Braids will trigger. Now we're going to sacrifice Braids. Doing that will trigger our commander. Now let's see if our opponents sacrifice their creatures to prevent our draw. The Katilda player probably will. I'm not so sure about Aminatou or the Gishath player. So we do get to draw 2 cards there. Now we'll make a token copy of Braids, and we get ourselves a Sheoldred and a land. Well, at least we do have a land drop for next turn. And that's going to be it for our turn. Katilda starts by casting a Mother of Runes. That triggers their Oketra's Monument. They'll make a 1/1 white warrior. Tap, target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. When the token ETBs, that triggers Lunarch Veteran. Now when Mother of Runes ETBs, that also triggers Lunarch Veteran. After that, they cast a Sanctuary Lockdown. That triggers their Monastery Mentor. Humans you control get +1/+1, and for 2 tap, 2 untap humans you control, tap target creature an opponent controls. So their Monastery Mentor gets a buff. Now they'll make a 1/1 white monk. That monk ETBs, that triggers their Lunarch Veteran. Now their Sanctuary resolves. Now they cast a Join the Dance, create 2 1/1 white human creature tokens, and it has flashback for 5 mana. That triggers their Monastery Mentor as well as their monk. So Monastery Mentor will get a buff, so will the monk. They'll make another monk. That's going to trigger Lunarch Veteran. Now they'll make the 2 humans. And when they ETB, that's also going to trigger the Lunarch Veteran once again. So the Veteran's certainly gaining them a lot of life. Now they move to combat, but they decide to pass through combat, and that is it for their turn. Alright, well this is the moment of truth. Let's see if the Aminatou player does have Reanimation in hand. They start by playing a land. And now they cast an Intuition, search your library for 3 cards, target opponent chooses 1, put that card into your hand and the rest into your graveyard, then shuffle. And they are choosing us. Alright, well this may be where we actually see all the reanimation spells, and we have a very hard choice to make ahead of us. And it looks like they give us the choice of Serra's Emissary, Ashen Rider, as well as Runescar Demon. The Ashen Rider is really good removal. I think I actually want to give them the Serra's Emissary here because that's a card that we can actually play around the most. Now of course the worry here is if they actually have a Live in Death, but now they move to activate their Weathered Wayfarer. They're going to search their library for any land, and they just get themselves an Underground Sea, and that is going to be it for their turn. Gishath plays a land, a Rogue's Passage, so they can pay 4 mana and tap it so target creature can't be blocked this turn. And now they cast Atsakan Seer, tap to add 1 mana of any color, and sack it, return target dinosaur card from your graveyard to your hand. Now when that ETBs, that triggers their Marauding Raptor, so it'll deal 2 damage to it. Now they move to combat, the Raptor goes towards the Aminatou player, damage goes through, that knocks them down to 31, and that is going to be it for their turn. And we draw in a Lend of the Dusk Rose, so we'll start by playing our Godless Shrine. We'll lose 2 life so it comes into play untapped. And now we'll cast our Drivnod. Now we'll move to combat. We'll send everything we can towards Aminatou. That knocks them down to 26. Now we'll move to our end step. Braids is going to trigger. And we're going to sacrifice Drivnod. That's going to trigger Ratadrabik twice. So we'll make 2 token copies of Drivnod. And once again we do draw 2 cards from Braids. A Necromancy and a Grave Pact. Would have been great to see the Necromancy earlier. So now let's make our 2 Drivnods. Now we will have to go to discard. And we are going to discard our Sheoldred. If we're lucky enough that the Aminatou player doesn't actually have a Live in Death in their hand, then we're definitely going to be able to reanimate some juicy targets. But now we move to the Katilda player's turn. Now they start by casting a Druid class. That triggers their Monastery Mentor and their monks. So the Mentor and the monks will get bigger. Now they'll make a 1/1 monk. That'll trigger Lunarch Veteran to gain them a life. And Druid class says, whenever a land ETB is under your control, you gain a life. The next level is you may play an additional land on each of your turns. And when you reach the final level, target land you control becomes a creature with haste, and this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. It's still a land. Next, they level up their Druid class. Now they move to combat, but they actually decide not to attack, and then they pass the turn. Okay, well let's see if our fears are going to be realized here with the Aminatou player. We just really don't want to see that land drop into Live in Death. So they do play a land for turn, but instead they actually cast an Unburial Rites, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it also has flashback for 4 mana. And it looks like they're targeting the Elishnorn Grand Cenobite. Very good creature in this situation because it's going to wipe our entire board except for Ratadrabik. And notably, it also pretty much wipes the Katilda player's board as well. So that play certainly was bad for us, but it could have been a lot worse. Now they move to combat, and they send the Weathered Wayfarer towards the Katilda player. And with that, the Katilda player actually scoops it up there. They were in a pretty tough position with basically no cards in hand and really having no board state anymore, so it was going to be very hard for them to get back into the game. But that is going to be it for the Aminatou player. Gishath starts their turn by casting a Zendikar Resurgent. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced, and whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. So just setting themselves up with a really strong value engine there. Now they actually do move to combat here, sending their Raptor towards the Aminatou player. Not sure if they realise the Elesh Norn can just block it and kill it. Maybe it was a mistake, or maybe they just feel the Aminatou player is too far ahead at the moment. And that's exactly what they do. And that is going to be it for the Gishath player. And we draw a land, which is actually really good to see. I think this is going to potentially be a very grindy game against what is going to happen to be 2 graveyard decks, and we'll have to wait and see what the Gishath player has for us. They're definitely not out of the game either yet, but we'll start by playing our Caves of Koilos. Next, we're going to cast our Necromancy. When it ETBs, we're going to target their Agent of Treachery. Now we're going to use Agent to steal their Elesh Norn. Finally, we're going to cast Victimize. We're going to choose Sheoldred as well as Braids. We're going to sacrifice the Agent of Treachery. Now we get Sheoldred and Braids back to the battlefield. Now we're going to move to combat. We'll swing our commander towards the Aminatou player. The damage goes through, knocking them down to 19. Now we're going to move to our end step. Braids will trigger. We're going to sacrifice our Sheoldred. That's going to trigger Ratadrabik, so it'll make a token copy of it. Now we draw 2 cards, an Erebos and a Black Market Connections. And now we move to the Aminatou player's turn. They start by playing a land. Next they cast their commander, Aminatou the Fateshifter. +1, draw a card and put a card from your hand on top of your library. -1, exile another target permanent you own, then return it to the battlefield under your control. And -6, choose left or right. Each player gains control of all non-land permanents other than Aminatou the Fateshifter, controlled by the next player in the chosen direction. Now notably, they can actually flicker their Elesh Norn using Aminatou, and unfortunately that will mean we'll lose our Sheoldred because it will be a 2/2. Next they cast a Liliana of the Veil. +1, each player discards a card. -2, target player sacks a creature. And -6, separate all permanents target player controls into 2 piles. That player sacks all permanents in the pile of their choice. But it looks like the Aminatou players actually missed that line and they're actually upticking Aminatou instead. So we might have got saved by a little bit of luck there. Next they uptick Liliana, making each player discard a card. We're going to just discard Erebos. And that is going to be it for the Aminatou player. On Gishath's upkeep, our Sheoldred triggers, so they'll have to sacrifice a creature, and they only have 1 on board. In response, however, they sacrifice their Atsakan Seer, and it looks like they're returning their Marauding Raptor to their hand. Well, that will be nice with their Zendikar Resurgent. It'll help them draw some cards, which they probably need at the moment with only 2 in hand, though they will draw a 3rd this turn. Now, it looks like our opponent actually attempted to use their Spinerock Knoll to cast a spell, and they are currently in their upkeep. They might have forgotten that they need to do damage to be able to trigger that. Now we do move to their main phase, and now we see them cast their commander. That triggers Zendikar Resurgence, so they'll draw a card. Gishath's Sun's Avatar has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and whenever Gishath deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library, put any number of dinosaur creature cards from among them onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Now it does come in as a 5/4, which means they're probably not going to attack us. They're going to make our life a lot easier to be able to take out the Aminatou player. Now they move to combat, and Gishath does swing towards the Aminatou player. The damage goes through, knocking the Aminatou player down to 12. Now let's see what hits they get off their commander. And it looks like they actually whiff there. Well, that's definitely got to feel pretty bad for them. And unfortunately, that is going to be it for their turn. Now on our upkeep, our Sheoldred triggers. So we're going to be able to return a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. So we're going to return our original Sheoldred. And we draw a Nykthos for turn, which is really great with all of our Black Devotion at the moment. So let's play that land. Next, let's move to combat. We're going to swing out at the Aminatou player to take them out of the game. The Aminatou player goes down. Unfortunately, that does mean we do lose the Elesh Norn, which is a little sad. But now we only have 1 opponent left to deal with. So now in our second main phase, let's activate Nykthos. That'll give us 7 black mana. We'll use 3 of it for Ashnod's Altar. Next, we're going to cast Gift of Immortality, and we're going to target our Sheoldred, the original one. Now we're going to sacrifice our original Sheoldred. That's going to trigger our commander as well as Gift of Immortality. So Sheoldred's going to come back to the battlefield. We're also going to make a token copy of Sheoldred. Now we're going to have enough mana to cast our Sun Titan. And that ETBs, we're going to target our Necromancy in our graveyard. Now we're going to use Necromancy to bring back our Drivnod. So a lot of value had this turn, that's for sure. This is pretty much the dream turn when you play Ratadrabik and how you love it to play out. Now we'll move to our end step. Gift of Immortality and Braids both trigger. So Gift of Immortality will return attached to Sheoldred. Now we can also sacrifice an artifact, creature, land, or enchantment. We're going to sacrifice Drivnod. That's going to trigger Ratadrabik twice to make us 2 Drivnod tokens. And now we can move to the Gishath player's turn. On their upkeep, 3 of our Sheoldreds trigger. So Gishath is definitely dead this turn. Gishath starts by playing a tap land for turn, which gains them 1 life. Next, they cast a Lurking Predators. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you may put that card on the bottom of your library. Very strong card, but probably a little too late here. And then they follow that up by casting a Dawnhart of Urborg. Creatures you control get +1/+0. You can +1 to add a red or green. Creature spells you cast can't be countered this turn. And -2, target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Next, they activate Dawnhart, upticking it to make some mana. In response, we're going to use our Ashnod's Altar to sacrifice our original Sheoldred. That's going to trigger Ratadrabik 3 times. So we'll make 3 Sheoldred tokens. Original Sheoldred's going to return to the battlefield. And now we'll let Dawnhart resolve. Next, they recast their Marauding Raptor, which triggers their Zendikar Resurgent to draw them a card. Now on their end step, our Gift of Immortality triggers. So it's going to return attached to the original Sheoldred. Now we move to our turn. In our upkeep, all of our Sheoldreds trigger. The first is going to return Drivnod, and the second is going to return Erebos. Unfortunately, the rest are going to fizzle. And we also draw an Elixir Core for turn, which is actually going to go really great with a Lender to help us close out the game here. Let's start by casting our Elixir Core. That's going to trigger Gishath's Lurking Predators. Let's see if they find something. And they do actually get a hit. They get themselves a Trapjaw Tyrant. Whenever it's dealt damage, exile target creature an opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. That also triggers their Marauding Raptor, so it's going to deal 2 damage to it. Now they do get to exile a creature of ours. Let's see which one they target here. And it looks like they target our original Sheoldred. Okay, well in response, we're going to sacrifice it using our Ashnod's Altar. That's going to put a lot of triggers on the stack. The most important being the 4 Ratadrabik triggers as well as the 4 Erebos triggers. So we're not going to worry about drawing with Erebos. We've pretty much got the game here. We're going to make 4 more Sheoldreds. Say no to the card draw. Original Sheoldred returns to the battlefield. The Tyrant's trigger fizzles. And now we can resolve our Elixir Core. Next, we're going to cast a Lender. That triggers their Lurking Predators once again. But this time they only reveal a land. When the Lender ETBs, that triggers our Elixir Core to gain us a life. Next, we're going to sacrifice our original Drivnod. That's going to put a lot of triggers on the stack once again. So now we're going to be making a lot more Drivnod tokens. And we're going to gain life each time 1 ETBs. Now we're going to sacrifice our Elixir Core. Many more triggers go back on the stack. Now our board is starting to get incredibly big, while we're also gaining quite a good amount of life here. And all the while our 1 Lender is growing larger and larger. And now we're going to sacrifice our Lender, which is currently a 12/12. Let's just hope that Magic Online doesn't break here. And with that, guys, we actually made Magic Online crash, so I think we're going to have to call the game there. Well, that is the game done, guys. Let's go to the review and discuss what happened.
Well, I have to admit, the Aminatou player had me sweating very early in the game. After tutoring twice for powerful reanimation targets, I was so worried that a living death was coming once they hit 5 mana. Luckily for us, this wasn't the case, and though we did get hit pretty hard by that reanimated Elesh Norn, it also caused one of our opponents to concede and actually ended up setting us up for a very explosive turn which followed. We also got to see the power of Sheoldred and Ratadrabik together, and once it was basically the Gishath player left, we were simply too far ahead on resources to be stopped. Well, that's it for today's video. This game was a really great demonstration of just how far Ratadrabik can get out of hand with the right pieces, and I hope it was a pleasure to watch. Until next time, guys.